Hello, everybody. I've been quiet on the video front because the scale of tragedies that we have all witnessed this past 1 month has made it so difficult to focus on anything that brings us relief or pleasure or insights into other dimensions of living. It's like we have been polarized between survival of the lucky, not even the fittest, because the fittest are also getting sick and falling prey to the second phase of the coronavirus. But I had to get my act together because you cannot be sitting in the doldrums at home forever. And I just feel the show has to go on. But what I can try and do is to be a little more sensitive in what I select to discuss here. And so I am discussing today the healing power of music, because for those of us who have lost loved ones and for those of us who may have suffered and maybe recovered, um, I have discovered that music is the ultimate soul medicine that there is. Uh, Time, of course, is the biggest healer, but music can play a very, very key role in soothing one's spirit and helping one to release and let go of old pains. So, today's chapter, I am focusing on Mr. Rahman, uh, one of the most original sounding, game changing composers of the Hindi film industry. I remember when we had gone to see the film Roja when I was at Society magazine for a year, and we went to a nearby cinema hall, and we were just blown away by the soulfulness of the melody, the simplicity of the melody, particularly the song ये हंसी वादिया ये खुला आसमां आ गए हम कहाँ ऐ मेरी साजना. And all of us were like, who made this music? It's so fresh, it's not over orchestrated, it's so minimalist, it's so elegant. And it takes confidence to put a song together where you are not afraid to be minimalist. And just before the Rahman era of music in the 90s, we had a lot of over orchestration, we had a lot of drama, we had a lot of disco. And it was nice when Bidu was taking a take at disco with Aap Jaisa Koi, because it was still a little elegantly orchestrated. But a lot of the other 80s songs were just like really loud, like Hari Om Hari and sexy, 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 and loud, and they were like fast food. They didn't have any soul. But Rahman came on the scene and he ushered in a very beautiful Indian soul into film music. And it lasted. I actually feel there has been a golden era of Rahman. Maybe his last album has not got its due attention. But one thing I'll tell you from my encounter with Rahman, he always knew that if I'm sitting on some kind of a musical throne now, it's not going to last forever. So again, like a lot of our superstars, he was very sure that things get passed on to new people. He was very aware of Vishal and Shekhar's popularity. He was very aware of Ismail Darbar's music for Devdas winning over the nation. And I remember asking him, I said, what did you think of the soundtrack of Devdas? And at that point, Rahman was at his peak. He was doing international work with Andrew Lloyd Webber. He had scored a stage musical. He had, I think, even conducted the Philharmonic Orchestra. And he was working on Tolkien's soundtrack for, I think, a movie version, J.R. Tolkien's movie. And a Chinese film. So there was so much international work that was coming in. He could easily said, who gives a rat's ass? I've conquered the local market and now I'm global. Anyways, so I'll give you the story behind how I met Rahman. I actually had to ditch my own family in the Diwali of 2004 because I was working on my novel Bollywood on the Bend, and I heard from Rahman's team that because of Ramzan, he was in Chennai for the duration of a week. And I knew that I'm not going to just get time off to go and listen and watch a musician at work. So I actually used my Diwali holidays to go and get this encounter going. And I was super impressed because Noel was his PA at that time. And the South is known to be very punctual. So Noel came to the airport on the dot to fetch me. And since Rahman worked in the evenings because of Ramzan, he would wake up at 6 o'clock, literally smelling like a prayer room. He smelled like an agarbatti stand, and he was all white, and he was radiating a lot of pure, beautiful vibrations when I met him in his office. So his office and his residence were all connected. His studio was called Panchatan. And the first thing he asked me is, have you had tea? Are you okay? Are you happy? I said, yes. In fact, I was just Googling you and again just topping up my information so we could have a constructive conversation. And so the chat began pretty late after dinner. And I had a very beautiful opportunity to see him at work. So as you know, I'm very fond of observing people because I think conversations can be had a dime a dozen, but the kind of insights you gain by seeing people at work, it reveals what they say 1,000 words, a frame in that framework. So I sat there, and what I saw is that people accuse Rahman of being very electronica savvy, very tech savvy, which he is. But to be fair, he had lined up percussionists from all over the country. He had the Bengali ektara sound, he had tabla, he had all the whole range of Indian percussion instruments there. And he was working on the soundtrack for Water, which was later banned. And the vocals were already in place, so he was playing the vocal track and then experimenting with these different sound textures with live musicians. And he said, then I'm going to try the track with each of these textures to see which one is the most evocative, or maybe combine one or two or three to get the nuanced richness that I want to get. And it takes hours and hours because, you sample the sounds from each musician. Then with those samples, you're spending time in the studio playing out the song with those samples. So I found that it was both spontaneous and extremely technical to be making music the way Rahman did it. Then I loved his humility. He still had all the Sufi saints up in the studio. He always retained that I am nothing. And at one point I said, from Tansen's era, we've always been told that music has a phenomenal power of manifestation. So in Tansen's time, if he sang a particular rag, which supposedly heated up the atmosphere, the lanterns would the diyas in the hall would automatically come alive, And if he sang a monsoon rag, then the rains would start coming, even if it was off season. That was the power of manifestation that music had. So when I put this question to Rahman, he said, Sangeeta, look around you. Everything that I have today, whether it's 2 studios and a bungalow and, all these people working for me, internships, international projects, what is all this? It's just the power of music. I don't claim to own anything. I don't claim to have any other gift. But it is the power of music. And what I really found beautiful is that, so in one of his studios, we were drinking tea till 4 a.m. trying to stay awake and have, an intelligent exchange and a soulful exchange. More than the mind, for him, it was more about the soul. And I found this one room which was surrounded by books on Sufism. Literally, it was a treasure house. And I think Rahman's explorations of Sufism have in some ways dictated his musical styles. So if you see, one of the things he shared with me was that when the LTTE and the Sri Lanka issue was boiling, it was coming to really bad levels of boiling, and we had lost Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi to that conflict. It was at that time that he scored the music for a film about a human bomb. Manisha Koryala was the human bomb. And if you remember how soulful the music was, there was a track that went, "Ay ajnabi, tu bhi kabhi, आवाज़ दे कहीं से, मैं यहाँ टुकड़ों पे जी रहा हूँ, मैं यहाँ टुकड़ों में जी रहा हूँ, तू कहीं टुकड़ों में जी रही है." So, there was such a strong soulful element. I'm trying to remember the name of the movie. I think Dil Se. Yeah, it was Dil Se. And the theme song was Dil Se Re, Dil Se Re. And today there's a university in America, which is Berkeley, the Berkeley Music Group. They have revisited a lot of Rahman's music, and they've added so many more layers and textures, and they've made it truly global music, which it was anyways. But they've even enhanced that dimension. So always try and see on YouTube the Berkeley music students and what they've done with Rahman's music. So all said and done, so he said when this conflict was bubbling over, in Sufism we learned that repetition is a very calming, very therapeutic thing. So the songs that I made for the movies, I wanted to heal the wounds of humanity. And so if you listen to the music of Dil Se, I will tell you that after that movie release, there was no conflict with the LTTE for 2 full years. And think of it, think of the beauty of Chal chaiya 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 Sare ishq ki chhaaw chale chaiya chaiya Sare ishq ki chhaaw chale chaiya Pao janat chale chale chaiya chaiya. So it's all repetition. And he told me that I was infatuated with Chaiya Chaiya because it really made me move. In the movie theater, I was almost in tears because when you see in a panorama how Shah Rukh Khan and Malaika were doing this beautiful duet and on top of a train, and they were so carefree and so happy, and there was nature all around, it opened your soul. It literally it helped you to break through all the rigidity inside of you. And Andrew Lloyd Webber apparently was moved by Chaiya Chaiya, and he then decided to work with Rahman on stage musicals like I think something called Bollywood in London. So I understood, and he said Chaiya Chaiya, the original lyrics, of course it was done by Gulzar, but the original track, it's actually a Sufi prayer to God. So it's not really the beloved in the literal sense, it's the beloved in terms of the human connect with divinity. So it had a divine underlying mood. So when we talked about the healing power of music, I felt, okay, even in the times that we are living in now, there was in fact a viral video of a girl recovering from, a 30-year-old housewife, recovering from COVID, and she had taken plasma therapy and she was listening to music and she was swaying on the bed to love you zindagi. And when Hussein died also, he was actually thinking of the movie Three Idiots, where they go all is well. So people take a lot of hope from music, and sadly they lost the 30-year-old housewife to COVID, but she went with a singing heart. She went singing Love You Zindagi. Sadly ironic, very sad. So to get back into this narrative, I finally, when I was at the airport going back from Chennai to Bombay, I happened to see books on Sufism, and it finally made me understand why Rahman burns the midnight oils and he has fog fountains emanating fragrances, and why he chooses to work through the night. So in the Sufi philosophy, there's a book titled Teachings of Sufism and a section called The Practices of Listening to Music, and it said, come out from the 2 worlds when you would enter the world of music. Music belongs to you, and you also belong to music. The revered Junaid of Baghdad was quoted next saying 3 things must be considered when listening to music. First, time. Leaving aside all worldly recollections and attachments, collecting his concentration into one center and abandoning needs and wants, his whole body becomes tasting and longing, and he participates in listening to music. Second, place. Music should ideally be heard not in any public thoroughfare, but in a remote place protected from noise and confusion. It should be a neat and clean place with no bad smells to disturb the brain. Third, people. There should be no critics of listening to music, arrogant and dry ascetics, or mannerless people. There should be no fake or hypocritical Sufis. The reflection of the bad thoughts of those people will have an effect on others. It was as if the great Sufi peers watching over Rahman's life and work had guided me to this great understanding of ideas that shaped his approach to creating and performing music. And of course, Jai Ho was the anthem he created. And I remember going for a Rotarian, very elegant Rotarian Diwali ball in Hong Kong, where all the people who actually at one time would never want to say that they were from the subcontinent were dancing with gusto to Jai Ho. And of course, the economy was at an all-time high as well. So all the mystical pieces of Rahman's world fell into place, and I had no more questions by the end of that encounter. I hope you enjoyed listening to this, and let's continue to keep praying. Whatever forms of music are soothing to us, let's keep listening to them, and let's just keep ourselves going.